In 1847, in a hospital in Vienna, Austria, a doctor called Ignaz Semmelweis noticed something quite disturbing. He noticed that the death rate for mothers in childbirth, in giving birth, was around 18% for those who were attended by doctors. But it was only 2% in those mothers attended by midwives. 18 to 2%, quite impressive number. And that was quite disturbing as well for him when he tried to understand the reason. So he started some investigation and some research, and he found out the difference. The doctors, they were going straight from autopsies directly to the room and to the livers of the baby without washing their hands. We are talking about 1847, okay? Remember that part. So he introduced in that hospital a mandatory exercise, or a simple one, that the doctors were supposed to wash their hands always with chlorine solution. And the death rate dropped from 18% to around, or less actually, than 2% in just a few weeks. So it was like super connected again to the same rate realized from the midwives. So that was quite impressive. And the research itself was confirmed after testing or doing it in a different scenario, or in this case, a different hospital. The problem was he tried to publish, and he got some big troubles on that. Why? Well, the medical community just completely resisted to that data. Even though the study was well conducted, it was using all the right methods to prove the relation between the drop on the death rate and washing their hands. But the medical community was completely against it. Actually, they tried to ridiculize this doctor, or make him a monster just because he was doing this kind of bringing this kind of research to light. For the medical community, basically accepting this kind of data was the same as saying that themselves, the doctors, were responsible for those deaths. Semmelweis, the doctor, he was committed to an asylum, and he got a lot of sued people, met doctors going against him, saying that he was, insane or had some mental issues, and he ended up dying without even seeing the research that he started going forward. Of course, later, other doctors, decades later, they would come back on this research, they would find out the studies, and they will apply in different hospitals, and finally, that would be the accepted rule. But the lesson here is quite straight to the point, right? People are normally afraid about something that is scare them about a big change or being responsible for changes. And the problem is, usually people say, sometimes they even say that in interviews, or they say that to their manager, that they love change, they love to work in an environment where they have changes, but there is a limit for that. In the first quarter of 2026, the world of work produced an insane amount of changes in the structure of the companies, changes in the way of working in different industries, and research now, current research with data from beginning of this year and end of 2025 is showing that this is actually starting to affect people working on those different companies. And I know that you heard this before many times. The world is changing faster than ever, and of course, there's a difference between knowing that the world is changing and being affected by major changes all the time around you, like in the way you work, in the way you do things. And the research that I got in front of me, and you can check this later if you want, is from Deloitte, published in a partnership with Oxford Economics. They interviewed more than 9,000 leaders in 89 different countries. So the data is quite well structured to showcase that this is not just a tendency in one country, one industry. This is actually a global thing. And the data is quite scary, actually. The first number that caught my attention is probably the biggest one. It's a number for a headline, for example. One in three workers worldwide went through 15 or more significant organizational changes in the past 12 months. One in three workers with more than 15 changes that affected like the organization structure in the past 12 months. That is insane. That is insane. It's basically saying that your manager is changing, the structure of your organization, your area, your sector is changing, the structure on the way you produce your work is changing all this time, sometimes more than one time per month. It's what the data is showing. It's not me, it's data. And it's a well researched, well conducted research in this case across the world. So it's not a localized data for one single country or industry, as I said. Other number that caught my attention was that only 27% of those workers believe that the organization is managing change in a good way. That is very, very terrible to hear if you're leading or managing an organization. Only 27% of people believe organizations are managing changes in a good way. And then this is for the leaders on those companies. 85% of the leaders says that building adaptability or preparing the organization to change is critical, is important, but only 7% say that they're actually making progress on doing that in a better way. 85% think that is critical, 7% say that they are doing something good on this topic. Again, Deloitte, Oxford Economics, 89 countries, 9,000 leaders, hundreds of thousands of workers to come with this data that is super relevant. And I normally criticize a lot when people bring, you know, data from one thing like this one, good, good and critical numbers to analyze, and they connect that with another research that it's not confirmed that there's a relation between them. So be careful because what I'm saying here is just my opinion. I have no proof at this point that we can connect those two data. I'm just doing this disclaimer to avoid a confusion. But in the beginning of 2026, I also read in some other papers that the numbers of workers going on burnout or sick leave because of mental problems or anxiety is on the top. It's the biggest number of workings leaving their jobs because of mental problems or burnout is the biggest number in history. Again, I cannot prove, I don't have the data that connects this information about mental illness and burnout with the impressive number of changes that we are seeing at the same time. But in my opinion, and this is simply my opinion, you can disagree or not, it's quite easy to see a connection on those things. Because changes, when they are too much, when they're exaggerated, they make us anxious to actually know where should I put my energy, who I should impress. It's not that we should work to impress someone, but I mean, we want to make a difference, right? Sometimes in a customer, sometimes for a customer, sometimes it's for a specific manager because there is a promotion or opportunity to grow in the company. So you can prepare yourself to something. But when things are changing so fast, how could you prepare? It's impossible. And the numbers here, they show the gap, and the gap exists, right? The gap between the perception that change management is important, no question about it, But the perception that companies are doing something effectively around it, it's terrible. It's less than 10% of leaders saying that their companies are doing something on this topic. And I'm very strong. I'm a very strong position normally that management should be seen as a science with its techniques, with its frameworks, and you should apply it in the correct way. Same way that you apply for software development, same way you apply for engineering, same way you apply in many other areas, chemistry, rocket science. Management is also something that has its techniques to be applied, and people think that this is just like uh, nonsense, and they forget there are ways of doing things in a good way, to define a strategy, to move with that strategy, to cancel a strategy to not be implemented. But everything around change management, it is important. And the term that we are seeing in this research, it's called the change fatigue. So it's basically people being tired of so many changes, so tired that they cannot even realize where they should be positioned or how they should be positioned themselves anymore in their company, thinking on their growth. Because if things are changing all the time, managers structure everything, where should I go next? Let's say you were working the same position for 5 6 years, you want to go to a next level, you want to jump in the company ladder. Where is the ladder? What is exactly the next step for you? It's impossible to know if you had 15 changes in your structure in the past 12 months. And the reflection here, of course, or the main one at least, because we can make many different reflections, this one is of course, when was the last time that you actually saw a good change happen? One that you see and look, that makes sense. That is a good change on the structure. Things will move faster. The customer will see the value in a better way. We are going to communicate better. Think about that. When was the last one? Because there are good changes and there are great ways of making change happening. But companies are forgetting how to do that. And this has a price. And the price who is paying right now are the workers.